Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this Esper Reanimator deck as voted on by my supporters on Patreon in the weekly poll, featuring Hashaton, Scarab's Fist as our commander. This 2-mana 1/3 says whenever we discard a creature card, we can pay 2 and a blue. If we do, create a tapped token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So the goal in this deck is to discard some very expensive and powerful creatures and simply pay 3 mana to get them on the battlefield. To make that happen, we do need some discard outlets to put those cards into the graveyard and trigger Hashaton in the first place. So if we take a look at our deck breakdown, there's 3 main categories. The first one that we'll see here is the interaction, ways to interact with the opponent's game plan. That might include counter spells, removal spells, or ways to take away cards from the opponent's hand. Then we have our discard outlets, ideally ways to discard cards from our hand without having to pay any additional mana after the initial investment. That way we only have to worry about paying Hashaton's 3 mana without having to pay additional mana on top of that. And then finally, of course, our creatures that we're trying to reanimate, and these include some incredibly powerful cards, some legendary creatures of course, and even some cards that are banned in Commander for being too powerful. And then we've got 2 smaller categories, a small ramp section in case we need to redeploy Hashaton after it gets removed once or twice, or just to help us double spell more effectively. And then we have some additional reanimation effects, again in case Hashaton gets removed and we need to come up with an alternate game plan. It's nice to have additional cheap reanimation effects to get those creatures back onto the battlefield. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration, Crow Mox has been an exciting new addition to the format. Mox Amber is great with a 2-mana commander, and there's plenty more legends throughout. Dark Ritual can set up some explosive turns. Springleaf Drum I also don't mind, since our commander's not really planning to attack much, so we can just tap it for mana instead, and plenty of our looters can also discard without needing to tap, so then they can still generate mana for us. Lotho is great in a deck with lots of cheap spells, so we can double spell effectively and generate treasure tokens. And then we've got some ramp artifacts. Arcane Signet, Cold Steel Heart, and Transformer get the nod here since they can make mana of any color, so we're not playing any of the colorless ramp artifacts. And then Collector's Vault can double up as a discard outlet, but can also generate treasure tokens for us, so that can also be a way of ramping into our bigger things. Then we get to our interaction, where at 1 mana there's Curse of Silence, one of the better white cards in Brawl, naming the opponent's commander, so it costs 2 more to cast, and then we can sacrifice it once they cast it to still draw a card. Esper Sentinel can tax the opponent, and then there's Swords to Plowshares as the best white removal spell in the format. In blue we also get Brainstorm, especially good now with all the fetch lands added to the format, so we can put some bad cards on top and then shuffle them away, so we don't need to draw into them afterwards. Then Wash Away is the most efficient counterspell for opposing commanders, and then we have the classic counterspell as well as the busted Mana Drain, which can also generate more mana for us. Then we have some discard effects, Duress, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Thoughtseize, some spot removal with Fatal Push, as well as Bone Shards, which can also discard a card as an additional cost, so then it's only 1 additional mana on top of the 2 and a blue from Hashaton to maybe bring back a creature. And then Bitter Triumph at 2 mana is also very similar, can also answer Planeswalkers. Loran can deal with artifacts and enchantments, and Toxic Deluge is the most efficient board wipe available, although we usually don't want to blow up our own commander with it. And then we get to the discard outlets. In white, there's 3 creatures that can just discard a card at will, and then in this case get exiled until our end step. We've got Guardian of New Benalia and Hallowblade, which become indestructible and become tapped after discarding a card, but we can also activate this multiple times in the same turn. Ghostly Pilfer can also discard cards at will to become unblockable, and is also pretty good in the format in general, because if our opponent casts their commander, it counts as a card outside of the hand, so then it will also draw us a card. Then we've got our Jace to draw and discard, maybe it can transform into the Planeswalker after a while, and can also just be a way to set up our Hashaton on the following turn. We've got the Elite, which is very similar with Prowess, and Rona can also untap whenever we cast a legendary spell, so it can loot multiple times. Speaking of looters, there's the Likeness Looter. Psychic Frog, another great one that can discard cards at will while picking up +1 counters. And Vohar can also draw and discard, while maybe draining the opponent if we discard an instant or sorcery. Key to the City can also discard for free while making our creatures unblockable. Smuggler's Copter we can easily crew with our commander, so that can turn into a 3/3 flyer that also lets us draw and discard. And then we get to some of the more expensive ones. Champion of Wits is not the best discard outlet, since it's 3 mana to cast it, and then we get to draw 2 and discard 2, so we can't save it for the following turn like we could with our previous discard outlets, but it is also quite synergistic to just reanimate with Hashaton if we find a different discard outlet, because as a 4-powered creature, now when it enters, we get to draw 4 and just discard 2, similar to when we eternalize it, so we can also maybe make a 4/4 token with Hashaton and then still eternalize it later, so there's still plenty of synergy. Then Liliana can of course discard with the +1, while making the opponent sack a creature with a -2, and then Rafine needs to attack in order to connive, which can also help us discard and enable Hashaton. And then our finishers include Archfiend of Ifnir, that's the cheaper one, but can also be cycled for 2 mana, so for 5 mana total we can get a 4/4 version in play, and then now whenever we cycle or discard another card we can put a -1 counter on each creature your opponents control. So also basically a board wipe. Speaking of board wipes, Elish Norn can give opposing creatures -2/-2, while giving our team +2/+2, so then it doesn't matter that it's a 4/4 vigilance as opposed to a 4/7. Serra's Emissary could come down naming creature, and then now we cannot be blocked by opposing creatures and we no longer take damage from them, but can also name other card types to protect us from them. We've got the Hullbreaker Horror, which can also be pretty disgusting if we have lots of cheap cards in hand to enable its ability. Then there's Jingataxius, which can counter opposing artifacts, instants, and sorceries while doubling ours. Sheoldred Whispering One is a great way to keep reanimating creatures from our graveyard while making the opponent sacrifice a creature each turn. Then there's Toxrill, which will gradually shrink opposing creatures down, turning them into slug tokens on our side. Drogskull Reaver actually benefits from being a 4/4 as opposed to a 3/5, and then has Flying, Double Strike, and Lifelink while drawing cards whenever we gain life. We've got the Thunderhulk, another card that actually gets better if we turn it into a 4/4 with our commander, as now it basically turns into a 7/7, making 7 1/1 tokens, as opposed to normally just being a 3/3. Avacyn makes all our stuff indestructible, so it's also fine as a 4/4. The Broodlord can tutor up whatever we want. We've got Gristlebrand, paying 7 life to draw 7 cards, also very fun and actually banned in Commander. Then there's the Ashen Rider. When it enters or dies, exiles target permanent, can even blow up opposing lands with it. Valgavoth is also a lot of fun if we can get it going, exiling opposing stuff, and very hard for the opponent to get rid of. And Jingataxius lets us draw 7 each turn while reducing the opponent's hand size to 0, so they'll have to discard down to 0 cards each turn. And then we also have Sheoldred, not really a reanimation target, but just a fine 4-drop to cast on curve, since it synergizes so well with all our draw and discard effects. And then our reanimation spells include the classic Reanimate, will cost us a bit of life, but incredibly powerful at just 1 mana. And then a Late to Dinner, Zombify, and a Rite of the Moth at 4 mana are all quite great as well. And then the mana base is pretty straightforward, no real utility lands unless you count fetch lands as utility lands to shuffle with Brainstorm or just to set up our mana. They can get the various Surveil lands, 1 in each color, so we've got the Archive in blue-white for instance. Then I'm also playing all the fast lands since we have a relatively low curve. Hallowed Fountain and all the shock lands which we can find with the various fetch lands. Glacial Fortress is great when we have all these Surveil lands and shock lands, so it will often enter untapped. The Verge lands are also great with all the extra basic land types now. And then I'm also playing the full cycle of the slow lands, entering untapped starting turn 3, so we can still usually get those in play untapped. And then we've got 3 of each basic land, which can also be found with our various fetch lands, playing every fetch land except of course the red-green one, which wouldn't work here. And then Rafine's Tower is great too. Good Command Tower, and then we have Urborg as well, turning each land into a swamp, so that's also very effective with Sheoldred, giving it Swamp Walk so it can attack unopposed, and then also a way to maybe turn fetch lands into lands that can still tap for mana without needing to sacrifice them. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Lumra, a green landfall deck. Our hand seems functional. Got our discard outlets to set up Hashaton, get back Gristlebrand would be fun. Liliana can also discard without needing to pay any additional mana in the same turn as we pay the 2 and a blue. So that's really what we're looking for in this deck. Discard outlets that we can activate without needing to pay more mana. Turn 1 Goose. Turn 2 can start with Rona, perhaps. So we'll get an extra on tap trigger. Mono green's not gonna have a wealth of removal. So I can probably ditch Key to the City. They've already used Goose for mana, so Liliana's -2 is not looking too exciting. So let's activate first. And then we can play our commander. Untap. Activate again. And tap land can go. Alright, so next turn we could have ourselves a Hullbreaker Horror or a Gristlebrand. And we get to keep up Wash Away as well. That feels unfair. But yeah. So step 1 might be Gristlebrand to refill our hand, and then Hullbreaker is going to be better if we can cast cheap spells alongside it. And then do I want to draw now? I guess we can do so at any point. Could have maybe drawn into another 1-drop I want to cast. Since they probably weren't playing Lumra, unless maybe with a fetch land, so it was still worth keeping up. So now Nissa makes some more mana. And Harrow can keep enabling landfalls, so yeah. Opponent isn't done for turn. And in fact, they could still cast a Lumra, so we might actually get to Wash Away. So let's say no to that. Otherwise they would just keep going, getting back more fetch lands. And take 3. Alright, I think we've waited long enough. Can also use the discard to hand size as a discard outlet for Hashaton, I guess. Alright, we found some interaction. So, step 1 might be get a Hullbreaker Horror in play. I guess Archfiend also would have been an option. But, let's try it this way. So we now have a Hullbreaker. Inquisition, trigger Hullbreaker. And I can take the Nissa that I just made you discard. And then I guess we're good to attack. And yeah, our opponent has seen enough. Now if I Swords to Plowshares, I could also counter an opposing spell that's on the stack with a Hullbreaker Horror, while exiling a Tireless Provisioner, for instance. So our opponent's not coming back from this. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the 5-color Shrine deck. Our hand has something to maybe turn into a 4/4. Our only discard outlet is Bone Shards, but with 2 ramp artifacts we might be able to pay 4 mana basically to both Bone Shards and pay 3. So this could still work out. And for now, we'll just Surveil. One of the better cards we could put in play besides Jingataxius is Serra's Emissary, naming enchantments, so we have protection from enchantments. And we'll name black, I think. So is it time to see our first shrine? Not yet. Well, if they're keeping up interaction, they might be able to remove our commander, but still worth a shot. Mana drain. At least they're only getting 2 extra mana out of it. Still hurts. But we could recast it next turn. And now a Leyline Binding for 1 mana. That's impressive. 2 lands, getting them the full domain. So yeah, our opponent is definitely pulling ahead. And there's a Fractured Identity as well. Our opponent does not want us to ramp. Well, I guess we'll try again. Zombify now also an option. But there's nothing to Bone Shards, so for now the play still Hashaton. And then if they play their commander, I can Bone Shards and immediately Zombify. Jingataxi is back. Opponent's got more removal. Alright. Can play the Pilfer as a discard outlet. So now is it finally time for a Life's Origin? We'll get to draw off Pilfer. We'll draw first and then we can surveil. Ooh, mana drain. I guess we get to return the favor. So now I could hardcast Jingataxius. Although the opponent's almost out of cards in hand, so it's mostly for the card draw. And Clothis, so they actually had Graveyard Hate too. But we get to dodge it. And the rest could take their last card. Let's see, I guess this is 10 mana, so I'm still a little bit short. So in that case, I guess we'll just discard with Pilfer. So let's put that in play. And hit you for 2. Maybe it's fine to duress actually, since they could still maybe cast their card in their turn. Sphere of Safety can be pretty annoying. Okay, I'll draw a fresh hand. Find Counterspell. Discard 2 cards. Chromox could be great, so is Mox Amber, so probably just some lands. Alright. So they can make an extra mana. Replay their commander. We draw again. And I don't have to counterspell. This is pretty beatable. Although it can of course return stuff out of their graveyard as well, such as the Binding. So let's just go for it. The game's more exciting when we can't counter their top decks. If they leave their commander in the graveyard, Clothis could exile it next turn. Our opponent may have disconnected too. Also entirely possible. Our opponent cast the first stone, to be honest, or in this case cast the first mana drain. But yeah, we can see next turn Mox Amber enabled with Jingataxius. Chromox can pitch something that we don't want to cast. Springleaf Drum replaces itself in terms of mana. So then we could hardcast a Broodlord maybe, or an Elishnorn, not that there's any creatures in play to shrink down, but still gives our team +2/+2. So we don't really need Hashaton anymore, even though we could still use it with a Pilfer. But yeah, I think our opponent has left the game a while ago. Alright, so commander's in the graveyard now officially. Discard a Rewind. I'll decline. And we can fetch a basic. At this point, Bone Shards can go. Cast a Broodlord. Could also get another counterspell like Wash Away to have that just in case. But Emissary seems decent. Hullbreaker Horror, also a solid option. Avacyn can protect our team, except from exile effects or mass bounce spells. But yeah, for opponents playing an enchantment deck, I assume they'll have lots of enchantment removal as well. And we even found a Dark Ritual. Discard some lands. I'm keeping the fetch land because we do have Brainstorm as well. So those can synergize. But yeah, this Colossus trigger is probably going to time out. They could still exile their own commander to send it back to the command zone. In the meantime, we picked up some cheaper cards. Lots of discard outlets, Guardian, Rafine, the Elite. But the game seems over. Playing Ilishnor next turn can also pump the team, although we already have 14 exactly. And that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Helga, so banned ramp. We have Reanimate, so that's pretty nice. Bring back Ashen Rider. I'll try it. So we can go turn 2 Copter, perhaps. Turn 3 Hashaton plus Reanimate. And then we'll also have this combo in play for any future creatures we might draw. Opponent's got fetch lands into maybe a 1-mana elf to play turn 2 Helga. Yep. Okay. There's Helga. And we'll play Copter. Could have also gone for Ghostly Pilfer, but they've already cast their commanders, so it doesn't necessarily draw us an extra card. Okay, so play Hashaton. Opponent uses Boseiju on Copter. Alright, that's too bad. So we don't get to reanimate this turn, it seems. I can still cast a Collector's Vault if I'd like, or a Pilfer, which can set it up for next turn. Okay. And now Gristlebrand also joins the fun. So we can actually put both into play, one with Reanimate, one with Hashaton. Bonnie's not bad either. At least they're not triggering it right away. Okay, so start with Ashen Rider. And I guess we could also just do Ashen Rider twice. Start with Bonnie. But I kind of like Gristlebrand here, or we could save it for next turn. And for now, just get rid of Helga with Reanimates. Yeah, I guess we'll go with maximum interaction. And then that's good enough. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Vadrok, Apex of Thunder, so kind of a Jeskai mutate, maybe control deck. Our hand's a little light on discard outlets. Although, Rafine is a good one since it has some built-in protection as well. Yeah, we get to curve Hashaton into Rafine. And then Rafine can still improve our hand should they answer our commander. So we can at least still come up with an alternate game plan. Spell Bomb can bounce our creatures. And an Urza's Rage will take care of it. Alright, back to the command zone. Reanimate, that's exciting. So if we get to discard one of our creatures, we can immediately bring it back. Maybe reanimating Shield Roots while discarding more of our creatures could be effective. Palantir, so they won't be using Spell Bomb here. Spell Bomb, I guess, is a reason to maybe go for Valgavoth with a built-in protection, so they can just bounce for 1 mana. I'll lose life. 3 damage from Narset, I'll take it. Alright, so get in with Rafine. And then, yeah, Valgavoth might be the way forward. Thunderhulk is also a decent option, since we'll still make some tokens, but it's not as good as with Hashaton, because then it's just going to be 3 tokens as opposed to 7. So, yeah, Valgavoth makes sense to me. And then reanimates. And we can surveil end of turn. Our opponent does not have 3 non-land permanents to sacrifice at the moment. Possible they have some board wipes. And yeah, we get the Spell Bomb thanks to Valgavoth, so maybe they should have done that first. Now we do have to be careful since we're at 13, so Palantir could burn us out if we're not careful. For now, Prismari Command. Also pretty strong card with their commander if they do get to mutate it at some point. But whatever they discard, we now get to steal. Fetch lands are also welcome. Also don't have to sack the fetch land since we have Urborg turning our fetch lands into swamps. So at 11 life, I think we let our opponent draw here, although I guess whatever they mill, we also steal with Valgavoth. Alright, let's lose life. Alright, just 2 lands. So I don't think I fetch, although we're about to gain 9 life, so we're probably fine. And, sure, I can surveil. Brainstorm, good with our fetch land as well. Alright, let's start by attacking. And then we'll grow our lifelinker. Definitely happy to keep up a counterspell. And for now, Toxrill can go. Champion of Wit's also fun to eternalize. And do we main phase Brainstorm? Yeah, we have so many options now. It's pretty ridiculous. Sure, I'll Brainstorm now. Can maybe deploy the Elite. Backstreet can go, and a fetch land since we have multiples in exile. So we can play Flutterstrand and shuffle. And Island is fine. Could keep up 3 mana Wash Away instead of playing Elite. Can play a Spell Bomb and maybe just a Role Reversal to steal the Palantir. Or maybe better yet, Prismari Command, make a treasure. I could make the opponent draw 2 and discard 2 as well. It's kind of funny. Could also just destroy Palantir. If we don't want to Role Reversal it, that's maybe easier. So we'll get a treasure. Blow up your artifact, steal it with Valgavoth. Play it. Upside of Role Reversal, I guess, is that it already would have had additional counters on it. So maybe that was better. Alright, and then I'll just pass with Wash Away up. No need to take more risks. And then, yeah, if you want to lose life here, that's fine by me. They let us draw Jingataxius. Well, that was quite the turn. So their opponent needs a Supreme Verdict, pretty much, an uncounterable board wipe. Now, Whirlwind is acceptable. Opponent passes. And they seem pretty dead to me. I'll maybe diversify a little bit. Cyclonic Rift for 2 mana, bouncing their own Palantir. You can have it. Now we have Cyclonic Rift, and our opponent explodes. Well, that was pretty brutal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Loot, the Pathfinder. So kind of a teamer ramp deck. Our hand is a bit light on the discard outlet, since Champion of Wits, if we want to use our commander, costs 3 mana. So I'll take a mulligan. This one's better. Can Sentinel on 1, Commander on 2, Fleeting Spirits is a discard outlet as well. And we also have Archfiend, which kind of enables itself to an extent. So, get a Plains, Verdant, maybe getting blue-black. Mostly expecting Mana Elves on turn 1. It's going to be a tap land instead. Alright, could a Fleeting Spirit instead of Hashaton. Unless we're afraid of counterspells like Wash Away, that's a reason to play this first. And then it's still going to take me 2 turns to set up at least. Alright, so I guess we'll attack and then play Fleeting Spirits. Now Late to Dinner also gives us another reanimation effect. So if we Surveil here, end of turn, we want to keep lands on top. Ashen Rider can also hit lands, so we could go with a land destruction plan. Still nothing from our opponents. Maybe they have a way of countering triggered effects. Alright, so I want blue mana. Second color, probably black. And I want to Surveil to try and hit a land for next turn. Key to the City is not needed. We can still use Hashaton here if they don't have any interaction. But it would still be nice to hit our land drops. So we'll go ahead and attack. Can use this at instant speed. But better to get our 3 damage in. And then, yeah, I guess we'll pass, unless we want to just Ashen Rider their land. Yeah, maybe that's fine. Discard Ashen Rider. Pay 3. And get your Triome. Ooh, Veil of Summer. Was not expecting that one. Does that protect her lands as well? It does. Wow. Okay. So, don't often see Veil of Summer main decked in Brawl, since it can be kind of awkward, but yeah, I guess her opponent still thinks this is good enough. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing another Helga deck. Well, Toxic Deluge is pretty good against creature decks that are trying to ramp their hand into play, but otherwise it's still functional, just missing a Curve Topper, which we should be able to find soon enough. So turn 1 has to be Backstreet, and a Hullbreaker will keep on top. Could have milled it to set up Rite of the Moth, but we have Vohar, so we can maybe double dip and both have a 4/4 hull breaker as well as eventually reanimate it. So for now, play Vohar. And then next turn we can activate it. Play Hashaton, play Springleaf. Don't want to discard the hull breaker just yet. So I guess we can play this first. And then just pass. So our opponent off to a slower start with a lot of tapped lands. Says no to a Birds of Paradise. So maybe we don't need Toxic Deluge. And now Sarah's Emissary is quite powerful. Although we can put it in play at instant speed, so don't really feel the need to do anything besides maybe attack. If our opponent tries to play an instant speed removal spell, we can put an Emissary, name Instance. Ooh, Ashen Rider's also tempting, but we'll start here. So that fizzles. And next turn we can maybe do them dirty with Ashen Rider blowing up lanes. Opponent plays Helga. Alright. So, got quite a few options. But yeah, maybe now Ashen Rider deal with Helga. Or we could Ashen Rider land and then just cast Liliana, that also works. And hit your Tri-land. And then just cast Liliana -2. And then we still have the Hullbreaker special waiting in store.
Haven't you ever heard of personal space?
And that's good enough. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and we finally encountered a worthy opponent, Nadu, Winged Wisdom. It is the nerfed version, admittedly. Otherwise, we probably don't stand a chance. So, this hand has discard outlets aplenty, but Elishnorn, I guess it's an answer to Skewed Swarm, if that's their win condition. But I'm not totally convinced. It does deal with Mana Elves as well. Maybe this is good enough. And then hope to find more Curve Toppers. Probably prefer playing the Looter over Hallow Blade, since this actually digs us deeper. Could also go Transformer and then next turn both Hashaton and Looter. Yeah, kinda like that idea too. Otherwise we would waste the mana next turn. Ooh, Combat Research. Was not expecting the elf to get suited up. It's probably gonna struggle to attack next turn, but maybe they just needed to hit her land drop. Small chance they can counter my commander. Nope, just a tap land. So now we can play the Looter, which can discard Elishnorn next turn. And there's Nadu, alright. And a mana drain, pretty nice to have left. Fetch Island. Activate Looter. Discard Elishnorn. And keep up double blue. Blow up your elf and hit for 3. With mana drain backup, this is gonna be tough, but we'll see. Nadu is a pretty messed up card in its own right. Just gotta stop the enablers that target it for free. So Boots is 1 mana to target Nadu. Yeah, that might already be worth countering, honestly. Although maybe we can just wait and counter their finishers instead. Because I don't have anything to really spend the mana drain mana on. Alright, Storm Drake, that one might be worth countering, since that can steal our commander otherwise. Or I guess an Elishnorn as well. So, Looter can go looting, might find some goodies. If not, I can turn Hallowblade into a 4/4. And still leave up mana drain while maybe surveilling. Alright, opponent's at 11. And let me read Stormdrake one more time. When it enters, exchange control of this creature and target creature and opponent controls. If you do, get 4 energy, then sacrifice that creature unless you pay an amount. So they could get rid of our Elishnorn. I'll just fight over it. Still want to fetch a Surveillance to try and find more action. Opponent could have their own counterspell, of course. A Dispute. That works. Alright, so I'm curious to see what they're going after. Because yeah, Stormdrake does die on the spot, but that just means we don't get a Stormdrake. And then they cannot steal Elishnorn, I guess, so... yeah, maybe that didn't quite work out according to plan. They can still pay 1 mana to re-equip Nadu with the same boots. And do it once again. But yeah, opponent's too far behind, so yeah, we even bested Nadu. So that's a pretty good sign. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Thalia and the Gitreog monster. So kind of a landfall-y ramp deck. Our hand has a bit of interaction, discard outlet, but it's the expensive one, and then Archfiend. So no great looting effect to get us going. Take a mulligan. This one's also very clunky with way too many curve toppers. Alright, this we can try. So we have Inquisition on 1. Turn 2, either Guardian or Hashaton. Turn 3, play the other, and then turn 4, maybe bring back a Shieldred. So probably a land has to go. And which one makes sense? Maybe Prismatic Vista. Opponent's got Kami for ramp. Not impossible that Inquisition misses here. Now we can go Transformer and then double 2-drop on the following turn. Happy to take Swords. Chromox is also pretty good. Could already play Oracle this turn. If they drew another non-land, that is. They could have gone for Thalia, but did not. So they must have drawn a good card. Yeah, I mean, playing Sentinel now before they play Chromox is sort of tempting. I think I still prefer Transformer double 2-drop. But we can reevaluate next turn. And there's Oracle. I'll land on top. Can make Thalia uncounterable, naming human. And there's a questing beast next. Hullbreaker's good too. Alright, so we get to double spell. And then next turn discard. If I discard Hullbreaker, I can play Sentinel afterwards to immediately trigger it. A Reclamation can get permanence back. And there's a Chrome Mox. So opponent wants to cast a 6-drop here. Pitching Questing Beast. So it's going to be Thalia. Keeping up 2 mana. So not sure what that was all about. But yeah, I think we like Hullbreaker Horror. Since now I could also Brainstorm. Maybe find a land and still play Sentinel afterwards. Start by bouncing Thalia and the Gitreog. Ooh, Reprieve to counter Brainstorm, fair enough. Still triggers Hullbreaker, so that explains why they wanted to keep up 2 mana. And they're about to top deck Primeval Titan, so that's a good one too. Alright, so we still definitely have a game on our hands. Bouncing Chrome Mox also could have worked out. So now our opponent's pretty far ahead on mana. But we get to annoy the opponents with our Hullbreaker. Bojuka Bog also exiles my graveyard, that's pretty good. So we can't reanimate Hullbreaker a second time. Makes our Shield Root also less impactful, since we can bring it back. So our opponent's going off. Fleeting Spirit and other discard outlets. I think we first want to Brainstorm to try and find an extra land. Probably still bounce Primeval Titan. Alright, found a fetch land even. And then Toxrill we're going to want to discard to Guardian. And I guess a land can go. So shuffle those away. And get Island is fine. And then I could play Sentinel and bounce Chrome Mox. And then we could go to attackers and lists. So we get to Scry. And then Thoughtseize seems good with our Hullbreaker especially. And then we're going to want to put Toxrill into play here. Although now I'm kind of liking Shield Root instead. So they have to sacrifice Oracle. Oh, this is pretty disgusting. So goodbye Oracle. We get to reanimate, I guess, Shield Root or Toxrill if we discard it. Opponent replays Primeval Titan. So they are getting ahead on lands, but can they turn that into an actual advantage? They've already searched up Bojuka Bog. So they're just gonna surveil. Do we get to draw? We do. Since our opponent maybe still wants to cast their Reclamation. Pitching their commander, sending it back to the command zone. No, I guess that doesn't work, because then it wouldn't make mana. So now it is stuck in exile. So yeah, a bit of a nombo there. And yeah, our opponent has seen enough. I probably wanted to discard Toxrill end of turn, so we can just bring it back with Shield Root as opposed to making a 4/4 version, since of course it is legendary, so we can't have 2 in play. So yeah, discard end of turn, untap. Now bring back Toxrill, and then Thoughtseize, triggering Hullbreaker, bouncing Primeval Titan, and then maybe make them discard it. So if they hadn't conceded already, that would probably do it. So we got to see our Esper Reanimator deck in action, and Hashaton did some pretty disgusting things today, so apologies to all of my opponents. Wouldn't be surprised to see this deck get bumped up into the Hell queue at some point, so it might face some tougher opponents like Rusko and Ragavan going forward, so enjoy it while it lasts. But for now, an incredibly powerful Reanimator deck if you're a fan of that strategy. So yeah, that'll do it for today's gameplay. Wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.